Hello and welcome to our Gem Pursuit. I'm Matthew Weldon, and with me as ever is my trusty co-host Elise Ketcher. Hello Elise.
Hello Matthew, and welcome everyone.
Thank you for joining us today for part 2 of our Cartier special series on some of the most interesting and perhaps slightly more unusual Cartier pieces of the 20th century. Today we're going to talk about a very striking design that Cartier used, particularly in the Art Deco period, and it is the Scarab Brooch.
Welcome to the audio guide for the Cartier exhibit located in London at the V&A Museum. If you're following along live in the exhibit, we'll give you the location of today's amazing item. However, should you be afar, don't fret. Our show notes have pictures and links so you can follow along just as well. For those following along, make your way to the World Room, the second room from the beginning of the exhibit. Situated on the left-hand side as you come into this room are 2 Scarab Brooches. Let's get started.
Scarab brooches, Elise, and I say brooches, but of course they can be in different jewellery. I know in store we've had scarab rings. At the moment, we've got a double scarab brooch. I think the first thing that always comes to my mind, and I know there's a few of our listeners, and actually someone asked me this question the other day. Are these real scarabs?
Well, in some cases, you will find actual real bugs that are placed into jewellery items of the Victorian period as curiosities. But in this particular case, the items that we're looking at are not real scarabs. They are actually fashioned scarabs. But what's really interesting about the 2 brooches that we're looking at, which also convert into belt buckles, is that there's elements of past and present in the actual design. Egyptmania or Tutmania started in 1922 at the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, but French design has actually been obsessed with the idea of Egypt a lot longer than the rest of Europe, and this is due to Napoleonic Wars in Egypt.
And I guess you can really see that Egyptian or Tutmania design coming through in these 2 brooches. And let's talk about when they were designed. They were fashioned in consecutive years, 1924, 25 and 26. But the 2 pieces that you stand in front of here are the 1925 piece and the 1926 piece. The 25 piece, I believe, is Cartier London, and the 26 piece is designed by Cartier Paris. Now, let's not forget, those businesses worked really closely together, and you can see the very close design relationship that they had during the 1920s.
And what's fascinating is actually the 1926 brooch was actually originally solely created as a belt buckle, and it attached to a gold chain, which would be worn around the waist. Like, just imagine how stylish that would have looked. With the 2 striking colors of blue, it really is contrasting in a way that would really capture your eye, especially to the center of your waist. Your central stone in this one is lapis lazuli, and this is a carved lapis, and it has your beautiful scarab details, including the ridged back and all of the facial details of the beetle. And then amazingly, on either side, we have these outspread wings. And this is where it gets really interesting, because this is not something new, but it is something that Cartier Paris did so well, which was actually unify the modern world at that time, the 1920s, with the ancient world. So these wings are actually from ancient Egypt.
Wow. I mean, that's quite incredible. When you look at it there, it looks quite modern, and we come across that design now and again, and it really is emblematic of Cartier. So, and as you said, the unified design, the outspread wings, really quite striking. I suppose of the brooches, I think the 1926 one, for me, really stands out. It's important as well that people understand what faience is made of.
Which is the blue wings. So that's the ancient Egyptian blue outspread wings that you're looking at.
Faience is a glazed ceramic made from crushed quartz and copper-based pigments. Now, Quartz, as our gemology fans will of course know, can be a wide variety of gemstones. Amethyst is a quartz, citrine is a quartz, smoky quartz naturally is a quartz. Am I missing any quartzes there, Elise?
Rock crystal.
Rock crystal is a quartz.
Is the clear version of it. And then you've got polycrystalline quartzes, which are all of your agates, your jaspers and things like that, which also fall under the umbrella of quartz.
Although it is made of a gemstone. It's obviously been crushed and with these copper-based pigments. It was acquired from Paris-based antiques dealers by Louis Cartier. The faience dates back millennia and was prized in ancient Egypt for its brilliance and also its symbolic power.
We've actually had a few faience pieces before in the shop, Matthew. If you're not familiar with this kind of material, it is actually a simulant of turquoise. So it looks very, very similar to turquoise. And if you're not versed in faience, you would think straight away by looking at it that it was, in fact, turquoise. And it's really one of those things that when I see a faience piece, I get really excited. And it's because it is literally an ancient object. So this is from one of the most famous talked about civilizations in the world. It's something that humans have been obsessed with for millennia. And even Cleopatra herself, when she was the ruler of Egypt, she had people who were studying ancient Egypt under her because that's how old the dynasty was. So this is, to her, it was still ancient. And also, if you think about people like Alexander the Great would have seen the pyramids and they would have been ancient to him. So think about that. That is mind-boggling when you think of how old this dynasty was. The fact that we've got pieces today which have outlived the dynasty and continue to inspire design is just absolutely incredible. Like, this goes beyond your antique periods. This is ancient and just shows human psyche and the way that we always have wanted beautiful design and artifacts around us.
I think as the Metropolitan Museum conservator Caroline Riccardelli explained it in this way, that from this ancient civilization and in antiquity, the faience was believed to embody the undying shimmer of the sun and the brilliance of eternity.
Before we move on to the owner of this particular 1926 Scarab belt buckle, I want to acknowledge the other faience brooch, which again is a original Art Deco piece. But the central part of this is the faience, which is the beetle in the center. And this is an ancient Egyptian piece as well. The wings are the 1920s add-on, which was done by Cartier. And if you look closely at the wings, we're looking at rows and rows of different colored gemstones to kind of display the texture and the wingspan of the beetle. We've got diamonds to the top. We've got these amazing calibre cut onyx, which is the black gemstone that you see. And then we've got diamonds, and of course, the yellow that you see there is citrine. This beetle, the striking colors, and of course, the opposing colors of that brilliant faience to the center and the colors on the wings is really such a typical design that you would see from the Art Deco period, where we're looking at really contrasting colors that highlight the central piece, but also add modernity to it.
I think it's really important, at least, to give that brooch or that piece its due credit, because I know the 1926 one, a lot of people consider as the most iconic, but I mean, if the 1926 one wasn't there, that would be like the star of any collection, right? So, yeah. I mean, it's just relative. And as you said, the owner, sometimes is as interesting as the piece. But
I would say more so sometimes. Like, sometimes pieces come alive because of the context of the item. So, an item is beautiful, but until you see it in situ, sometimes it just has no meaning to you. So like you look at it and it's a beautiful thing, but when you see it sitting where it was created, you're like, okay, I get it way more now that I've seen it where it's supposed to be.
But the 1926 piece, commissioned by Linda Lee Thomas, of course, very fashionable socialite, and wife of Broadway composer Cole Porter, who a lot of us might have come across. She had a very glamorous lifestyle, travel, jewellery, parties.
What I find interesting about Linda Lee is she is almost like an unknown figure to many. There is quite a few movies where she's been portrayed in, like Ashley Judd has played her, and she's always kind of seen as the wife of, which I sometimes find really distasteful. But I find that what's really interesting about her life is when she was 17 years old, she was married. She came from a very wealthy family in Virginia in the US. 17 years old, married. I couldn't personally see myself being married at 17 years old. Unfortunately, the marriage wasn't a happy one. And she was abused, so much so that actually she could prove it in court. And so, as you can imagine, the early 1900s, like men were still putting their wives in asylums if they weren't behaving. Do you know what I mean? Like this is what we're talking about.
The standard of proof would have had to have been extremely high.
Yeah, so we're talking about something that's like, she would have had some kind of body of proof. What that was, we don't know, but it had to be beyond a reasonable doubt. But she was able to get granted a divorce from this husband, but amazingly as well, she was also able to get alimony from him in the 1900s. Like, whoa. So I'm reading up about her life. I'd really like to hear in her words. Unfortunately, she never wrote down what happened. Maybe it was so distressing that she couldn't. But the fact that she lived through that, finds a love match with Cole, and they're married for over 35 years together. They have no children together, but they have a wonderful life. So, like you said, very fruitful. They travel together. One of my favorite photos of her is her passport photo. And she's sitting down. Unfortunately, today we're not allowed to have nice photos of ourselves. Look like an absolute criminal in mine. But she is sitting on her chair, side view. Obviously, her best side is showing. 2 long strands of pearls on, a very glamorous dress, and she's just kind of looking very, I wouldn't say sternly, but like cheekily into to the photographer, and the photo's taken, and that was her passport photo. But in the 1900s, as we all know, pearls in particular were considered way rarer than diamonds, the jewel of royalty. And she has 2 long strands of pearls on in this particular passport photo. So very wealthy, very well traveled, very well educated, and lovingly at the end, very well loved. So I think this Scarab brooch just kind of tops off a really incredible life and also incredible taste for jewellery.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much, Elise.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Please get in touch and let us know your thoughts on experts@courtville.ie. We're absolutely always delighted to hear feedback from our gem pursuiters. This episode was produced by Ross Hannon of Tape Deck, with project management and research by Veronique Gauguin and Fenia. For myself, Matthew Weldon, it's goodbye and see you next time.